never been and will never be a geopolitical or security actor in Europe. Or at least that's what we thought before Russia's invasion of Ukraine a year and a half ago. Thanks to China's implicit support to Russia's actions in Ukraine, most of the European countries have reconsidered their attitude towards China.
The Russian aggression on Ukraine further exacerbated the already deep mistrust that existed in Europe towards China before the war. In the beginning, China thought that the war would be a quick win for Russia and would support its own efforts to somehow reshape the global order. So in the initial stages, China sought to undermine public opinion across Europe and the support for Ukraine.
And not only politicians, but also the wider public has now a much worse perception on China. In Central and Eastern Europe, most of the countries now feel directly threatened by Russian aggression in Ukraine. And because China missed the opportunity to stop Russia from doing this, or at least to condemn Russian actions in Ukraine, now countries like the Baltics, Poland and Romania and so on and so forth feel that Russia is now a direct security threat to Central Europe, while China is an indirect security concern. In Western Europe, we have similar concerns. Many of the Western European countries are now afraid that their dependencies on Russia could be emulated by the Chinese side, and that Western European countries' economic dependencies on China could lead to a similarly problematic situation like the one we are having with Russia.
In a period when Europe was struggling with soaring energy prices and skyrocketing inflation, China tried to convey a message to European citizens that the EU's policies and their government's policies are wrong, that there should not be any sanctions towards Russia. And to that effect, it echoed Russian disinformation and propaganda. However, that had very limited impact, and support for Ukraine across Europe has remained overwhelmingly high.
So most of the European countries have changed their attitudes towards China. The Chinese actions vis-à-vis Ukraine have rendered the 16+1 cooperation either dead or at least a zombie mechanism. Is there a way out? Right now, it seems impossible to drive a wedge between Beijing and Moscow, but there might be some specific issues where European and Chinese interests might align and could at least influence the actions of Russia in Ukraine and beyond.
So in essence, the war showed to Europe that it cannot count on China to put pressure on Russia to end the war, which put into question the very foundations of the strategic partnership between the EU and China. But on the other hand, it showed to China that Europe is much more resilient and united than China had initially thought.
And since China is interested in a stable Russia along its borders, it would be utmost important to Europe to convince Beijing that no matter what the outcome of the war is, Russia will remain stable, and thus China might be interested in solving the situation in Ukraine rather sooner than later.